Welcome in, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I am Tristan Warner with Clockwork Sports. Today, we are covering the Week 1 NFL main slate on DraftKings and Fanduel, something I've been looking forward to for a long time, so I hope you are too. We're going to go game by game, see if there's any specific matchups we'd like to exploit, and identify the players we want to avoid. Let's jump right into it. First game on the docket is the Steelers versus the Bengals. Let's switch over to the screen share here. We're going to start with the Steelers first. By the way, Bengals are 6.5-point favorites, and this game has a 44.5-point total. Steelers really are a wait-and-see situation for me with Mitch Trubisky at quarterback. The only guy that kind of piqued my interest a little bit when looking at pricing was Najee Harris. $6,400 is just a little bit cheap compared to where he ended the season last year and for the volume he's going to get. However, this offensive line for the Steelers is projected to be one of, if not the absolute worst offensive line in the league. And I think they could struggle to score. I mean, not to mention that their team total is only 19 points. I don't know how many touchdowns they're going to get. Maybe maybe three, probably two, though. So I just don't like banking on Najee Harris. I think he's going to be extremely inefficient as well. So despite the low price tag on DraftKings, I am comfortable fading all Steelers in this spot. Let's go over to the Bengals. The Bengals are a little bit more interesting. Joe Burrow is one of those guys I think you can always consider just because he has the ability to be uber efficient. We know who his pass catchers are, so stacking him is really easy. You just go Jamar Chase and or T. Higgins. Both these guys are deep ball threats. They're game changers. So Joe Burrow with one or both of those guys are really easy stacks to make. I do think it's a little bit more viable on FanDuel where touchdowns are a little more valuable with the half PPR format. But I think you could play it on DraftKings too. If we go over to running back here, I think that Joe Mixon is in a really good spot. He's a home favorite, and they have an improved offensive line. He's not heavily involved in the pass game, so similar to Joe Burrow, I'd rather play him on FanDuel, where it is a half PPR format. I, however, would not play Mixon and Burrow in the same lineup together on FanDuel. I would try to avoid that if at all possible. Go with one of the pass catchers if you're going to be playing Burrow. Punt tight end, if you're looking for a punt tight end, Hayden Hurst at 3,300. I think you could do a little bit worse than him. Not my favorite, but I think he is worth mentioning. So let's move on. We have the Ravens at the Jets next. Ravens are 7-point favorites, and this game has a 44-point total. Excuse me. It's really hard not to like Lamar Jackson. Let's start off with him, especially if J.K. Dobbins is out. If J.K. Dobbins is out, which is looking like it might be the case. I know some of the projection sets have him out, some of them have him in. So this projection feels like a little bit of a hedge between the several different sites that I have averaged out here. If J.K. Dobbins is out, we could really see the Ravens rely even more so on Lamar than they normally do. I know that they already rely on him a lot. We could see it even more here because their backups to J.K. Dobbins are going to be Kenyon Drake and Mike Davis. Not two guys that you want to give the ball to a bunch of times in the game. So I think this could lead to either more rushes for Lamar Jackson or more passes. If they just forego the run game altogether with those guys, we could see just Lamar absolutely involved on every play, even more so than he already is. So I really, really like Lamar. The other thing with Lamar, similar to what we were talking about with Joe Burrow, we know where the ball is going to go. We know for sure that Mark Andrews is going to be heavily involved. And I think the assumption, at least my assumption and a good portion of the industry's assumption, is that Rashad Bateman is going to take over this number one role. You can see that he's clearly ahead of these guys, the other wide receivers on Baltimore in terms of projection. So if you're going to play Lamar, I think Mark Andrews or Rashad Bateman is the clear stack. They're both coming in with about 10% ownership. I believe that's where Lamar is too. Yeah, so all of them coming in with about 10% ownership. I think that's probably a little low for Lamar and probably pretty fair for Andrews and Bateman, but this is a spot I like attacking. We're obviously not very concerned about the Jets defense, even though they did improve in the draft this offseason. So I'm not concerned about the Jets defense, and I think this is a really, really good spot for Lamar, who I think in another week, or if Jalen Hurts was priced a little bit more appropriately, Lamar might be the highest owned quarterback. But right now, it's looking like Jalen Hurts is going to be, so getting a little bit of an ownership discount on Lamar, in my opinion. So let's move over to the Jets side. I don't think we need to spend too much time on these other guys besides Mark Andrews and Bateman. Do keep an eye on J.K. Dobbins, though, because that is big news for the Ravens. So let's move over to the Jets. Jets are starting Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco going up against the Ravens, who he won a Super Bowl with. So if you're into revenge games, I'm not, but if you're into it, then go for it. That's all you. He's also the cheapest quarterback on the slate on both sides. So not a whole lot to like here on the Jets side. I guess you could probably talk me into Elijah Moore, who's projecting pretty well at only $5,100. But as far as the running backs go, Breece Hall, Michael Carter, I expect this to be a pretty even split, especially to start the season. I don't see either of these guys having enough upside to crack tournament-winning lineups, so I'm comfortable passing on the running backs. Elijah Moore, maybe Corey Davis. These guys may benefit from having Joe Flacco over Zach Wilson. Just in terms of, being an accurate thrower and pushing the ball downfield. Joe Flacco obviously has a really strong arm, or at least did in his early days. So we'll see how this pans out. Ultimately, I think I'm pretty comfortable passing on the Jets altogether here. If you did want to bring back for your Lamar stacks, I think Elijah Moore is kind of the guy that I'd be leaning towards, or Corey Davis. You could see here Corey Davis less than 1% ownership, where Elijah Moore is coming in a little bit over 11%. So something to keep an eye on if you do want a Jets bring back with your Lamar stacks. So let's move on here. Next game up, we have Patriots at Dolphins. Let's start on the Patriots side. And let's also mention Dolphins are 3.5-point favorites in this game, as a 46.5-point total. Obviously not very interested in Mac Jones here. So let's just move on to the position players. And again, like the Jets, not a whole lot to like here. We can see that Jacoby Myers, projections liking him a little bit. Not the best matchup in the world, and Jacoby Myers doesn't really have that high of upside, and hasn't. His touchdown regression should come up, or he should positively regress in the touchdown category. However, I don't know if it happens this week, and the Patriots offense is not really one that I want to have a whole lot of lineups focused around. With only a 21-point team total, I'm not too excited about anyone here, so I think they are mostly a pass. I should mention Hunter Henry at 3,800. I think he's somewhat interesting, but ultimately a pass here for me on the New England Patriots. So let's go over to the Dolphins. Not too interested in Tua either. I think I'd rather skip over. I think there's some better guys, even in that price range that he is. One thing that did catch my eye, Tyreek Hill, under $7,000 and under 10% ownership. I don't know that I'll get to Tyreek, but this did pique my interest a little bit. However, it is the first game where he's moving from Patrick Mahomes to Tua at quarterback, and also Bill Belichick notoriously takes away the top opposing option for the opposing offense. So I think I'm okay skipping over Tyreek here. However, I think whenever he's below 10% and below 7K, I think you do need to consider him. Jalen Waddle being this close to Tyreek, pass for me. I'd just rather get up to Tyreek if you're going to play one of these guys. Chase Edmonds nursing a little bit of an injury here late in the week, and I also expect Mostert to mix in here quite a bit. So I think at best for Edmonds, this is a 60-40 split in his favor. However, I don't think that gives him enough of a ceiling to seriously be considered. So this game as a whole, honestly, is a pass to me. And I wanted to mention too, I'm not much of a better of sides and totals. I saw this total 46.5. This screamed under to me. If you can find, especially if you can find it at 47, which is a key number, if you can find it at 47, I really like that under. So again, I don't bet very much, but I did think that was kind of a high total for these two teams. So let's move on. We have the Niners at Bears next. Niners are 7-point favorites, and this game has the lowest total on the slate by 1.5. It's 40.5 points. So similar to the last game, not a whole lot to like here. I think that Trey Lance, I was interested in him to start the week, but now it's looking like George Kittle is going to miss. George Kittle, even when he's not involved in the pass game, is such a massive piece for this 49ers offense. I really don't think it can be understated. So if he's going to be out, which it looks like he might be, looks like these projection sets have him assumed out, I'm pretty much comfortable fading Trey Lance and the rest of the Niners too. No one really is standing out. Debo Samuel, one of those guys that I will just refuse to play. Simply because his efficiency has just been insane, especially over the course of last year. And it cost me. I'm not going to lie. It cost me last year because of my refusal to play him. But I'm not budging. I'm going to do the same thing. If he's going to continue to get the same amount of touches that he got last year, I just don't expect the production to be the same. And I think that Jimmy G was better for him in the offense than Trey Lance will be, because a lot of those rushes were because Jimmy G is not as mobile as Trey Lance. So it's possible that Trey Lance just gets those rushing chances that Debo was getting last year. I just think there's a lot of concerns. I should mention he's coming in projected to come in less than 1% owned. So if you do like Debo, I mean, huge leverage if it pays off for you. But even Elijah Mitchell, I expect Davis Price and Jeff Wilson to mix in quite a bit. I don't think that Elijah Mitchell has this stranglehold over the running back position. He might, but I'm just not certain of it. And especially on DraftKings, where he's not heavily involved in the pass game, and Trey Lance, anytime that he's, rather than throwing short, it's almost better for Trey Lance just to take it because of how great of an athlete he is. So really not interested in Mitchell. Ayuk, not 100% sure on him. He projects pretty well and coming in with low ownership. Honestly, I'm more comfortable just fading guys from the 49ers and the Bears altogether as well. I don't want to play Justin Fields. I don't want to play David Montgomery. There's been reports that Khalil Herbert will have more of a role this year. So I actually think that this projection is maybe a little light on him and maybe a little heavy on David Montgomery. Maybe you could talk me into Darnell Mooney, but it's not the best matchup. The Niners defensive line should have a massive advantage over the Bears offensive line. So I'm not exactly excited about these pass catchers having time to get open. Maybe you could talk me into Cole Kmet. But really, I don't want anyone from this game, to be honest. No one from the Niners, Bears. So let's go ahead and move on. This game has a couple interesting pieces. We have the Colts versus the Texans. Colts are 7-point favorites. Texans it's a 45.5 point total in this game. Neither QB is interesting to me. I'm very comfortable passing there. Let's start with Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is the most expensive running back on both sites, and for good reason. I prefer him on Fanduel just with his lack of pass catching role. It's not that he can't do it. That's just not really his role, especially when they have Nyheim Hines, who has been really good in that role for them. I'm a little bit indifferent on Taylor. Like I said, I'd prefer him over on Fanduel. On DraftKings, I'm pretty comfortable fading at this high price tag, especially with Christian McCaffrey coming in. I think he's $600 cheaper than Taylor. I would just so much rather play Christian McCaffrey. So I'm comfortable fading Taylor on DraftKings. If you do want some exposure to him, I would probably do it on FanDuel. Now we get over to the pass catch. Oh, I should, since we're here, let's talk about Damian Pierce. Damian Pierce has been one of the highest risers as far as the offseason goes, especially if you've been playing best ball. You know that he's been skyrocketing up draft boards as of late. I have my concerns here, especially in the first game. You can see he projects pretty well, have him for almost 12 points here. Not a ton of ownership. However, the Texans are 7-point dogs. The Colts have the ability to just sit on the ball. They can just run. We've seen them do that a lot, so it's possible that their time of possession doesn't leave Houston with a whole lot of chances. So I'm not exactly excited for Damian Pierce, despite this really, really low price tag, $4,800. Man, that's really inviting. It's really, really inviting. But I think I'm okay passing on Damian Pierce, especially I think that this ownership might get steamed up a little bit. Wouldn't surprise me to see him get up to 15, 16, even 17% ownership by the time Sunday rolls around. So keep your eye on that. I think my initial lean is to go elsewhere, though. So next up, the pass catchers. We have Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman is going to come in 26-ish% owned. That he might be the highest owned player on the slate, to be honest. He's 5,500. It's a really good matchup against Houston. I have my concerns. I think he's a lock if you're playing cash games. If you're playing head-to-heads, double-ups, 50-50s, I think you almost need him simply for the ownership and his really good projection and his cheap price. I can't imagine that he's going to stay this cheap. He'll probably be in the Brandon Cooks range next week, I would imagine. Excuse me. So I think that Pittman's a play in cash and kind of a fade in tournaments. I think that's pretty obvious with how his ownership is shaping out right now. I do like Brandon Cooks here at 6,300. It's an okay matchup for him, not the best, not the worst. I think he's okay. I don't have a whole lot to say about Brandon Cooks. He should be the clear alpha on this team. He is getting a little bit older. I think he's entering his age 29 season, so he's been around for a long time. I like Brandon Cooks. I like Pittman. I should mention, however, I do think that these guys are going to be paired together a lot, either Pittman with Cooks or Pittman with Pierce. So if you're going to do that, I would just be cognizant of the rest of your lineup. Try to get different somewhere else if you are entering some larger field tournaments. So no one else really jumping out at me here. Maybe Paris Campbell, only 3,300, but I don't think he's going to be that involved in the offense. I'm not quite sure what the upside is outside of him scoring a touchdown. So I think that's pretty much it with the pass catchers. Do have a couple interesting cheap tight ends here with Mo Alley-Cox and Brevin Jordan. I think simply based off of pricing that these guys are definitely in play. Not going to do anything crazy, but if you're looking for a punt tight end, I think you could do worse than Mo Alley-Cox and Brevin Jordan. Brevin Jordan might be number 2 in line for pass catchers on this Houston team, just right behind Brandon Cooks. So keep an eye out for that. I do think there's some interesting players in this game. Pittman, Jonathan Taylor, Brandon Cooks are the main guys I'm focused on. But do keep an eye on that Pittman ownership because I think it is very, very high. So let's move on to what's the next game. We have Jaguars at the Commanders. I don't see I didn't write down the spread here. So sorry about that. Let's see. Looks like Washington is 2.5 point favorites, and we have a 43, 44 point total right in that range. None of these quarterbacks really are enticing to me. I do think that some of the running backs are interesting, particularly Antonio Gibson and Travis Etienne. I think I'm saying that wrong, so apologies if I am. But these guys are interesting. If you're unfamiliar with the Gibson situation, Washington drafted Brian Robinson, who was looking like he was going to be the starter coming out of camp, and then he was unfortunately shot in a attempted carjacking situation. So really unfortunate situation there. It leaves Antonio Gibson as the projected lead back with J.D. McKissic kind of taking over those passing down roles. So Gibson, here's the deal. I don't really want to trust Gibson because it's clear that the team doesn't really have that much faith in him. However, McKissic's not going to be the base down back. Jonathan Williams was playing behind Antonio Gibson since Gibson's been there. So it seems to me like Gibson is going to be getting a lot of the base down work and then at least a little bit of passing game work, maybe a target or two. And if he's going to get 15 plus touches, you can't ignore him completely. However, there's a lot of concerns here, and I think that I am just comfortable removing him from my player pool because he's not heavily involved in the passing game. I think it's more easier to do on DraftKings to just kind of forget about him. But Etienne, he is 5,600. This is going to be his first game with the Jaguars. Obviously was injured all of last year, so we'll see what he's doing. My guess is that he gets majority of base down work and the pass game work, and then James Robinson kind of fills in when necessary. Etienne, obviously a lot more draft capital in Etienne and than Robinson, so I like his chances to kind of take over this backfield, and the matchup doesn't really scare you all that much. So I do think that he's interesting, someone that I will be considering this weekend. For the wide receivers, I really like some wide receiver. I should say there's one wide receiver in particular, Christian Kirk. He got a huge offseason deal And I think a lot of people think that he got overpaid, myself included. I think that's kind of the general consensus. However, that just shows you how much they believe in Christian Kirk and how much they wanted him in the building. So at this price tag, 5,100, and a middling ownership projection, about 13-14%. I like Christian Kirk here. I think that they're going to heavily involve him, especially early. They're going to want people to see that he's the real deal. And the other two wide receivers in this room are Marvin Jones, who is at the tail end of his career, and Zay Jones, who's been in the league for a while and just hasn't done much. So I really like Christian Kirk to be the alpha here, and Doug Peterson taking over the head coaching responsibilities from Urban Meyer, I think is huge for this offense as a whole. So I like Christian Kirk. This is probably my favorite play in this game. This game is not that enticing as a whole, so take that with a grain of salt. On the Washington side, I think Terry McLaurin is someone similar to, like I was saying with Burrow earlier. I think you always need to consider him. However, this price tag is a lot to handle, especially with their new addition, Jahan Dotson, who was a first-round pick. At their current price tags, give me 3,400 Jahan Dotson over 6,500 Terry McLaurin. You can see we have him projecting better at their respective prices. But yeah, I'd rather pay down for Dotson if you're absolutely set on getting a Washington wide out here. So tight ends, okay. Evan Ingram, 3,500. I think you can consider him. Logan Thomas, not sure if he's going to play yet, so keep an eye out for that. But ultimately, no one too exciting in this spot. So let's go ahead and move on to the next game. We have Eagles at Lions. This is a little bit more friendly game environment, if you ask me. Eagles are 4.5-point favorites, and this game has a 48.5-point total. Pretty high total, and I wouldn't be surprised if it went over either. Jalen Hurts is projected to be the highest owned quarterback on both sites, both DraftKings and Fanduel. He is underpriced, there's no doubt about that, and projecting very well. This matchup does not scare you in the slightest bit. I think Hurts is a very good play, and I'm almost certain that's going to be the optimal cash lineup. Or I'm sorry, I shouldn't say optimal. That's going to be the most popular cash lineup. That's probably cash quarterback. That's probably who I'm going with. However, in tournaments, I do think you want to get different either by stacking him or just avoiding him altogether. I think this ownership's just a little bit high, especially when you look at the other guys around him who I think may have similar ceilings or even higher ceilings at less ownership. Jared Goff is kind of a tough matchup for him. I'm comfortable just removing him from the player pool. We do have some interesting running backs here. DeAndre Swift and Miles Sanders would be the two guys that we're choosing from here. DeAndre Swift, he's going to split time with Jamal Williams. What that split will be remains to be seen. I think it's probably in the neighborhood of a 60-40 split with Swift. And he is involved heavily in the passing game. So Swift always has some upside at 6,800. I definitely think you need to consider him coming with some ownership here. So, you don't want to go overboard, but I do think that Swift is in play here for sure, especially if you need a run back for your Jalen Hurts stacks. Miles Sanders, less than 3% ownership here, projecting decently well, and he's massive leverage off of Jalen Hurts. If he's able to sneak in a rushing touchdown or maybe even two and take those points away from the rest of the offense, mainly Jalen Hurts, that is such massive leverage. Now, Sanders, similar to Swift, is not going to be a bell cow. He's going to split work with Kenneth Gainwell, and I'm sure that Boston Scott will mix in as well. So the upside is questionable here, but I think that's baked into his price tag a little bit. I don't think that, this 15-point ceiling for Miles Sanders is out of the question. Involved in the pass game a little bit, so I do like Miles Sanders here. I know he was dealing with a little bit of an injury, so just keep an eye on that, but I do think he's good to go. I think he's a really interesting leverage play off of the much more popular Jalen Hurts. Let's go to the wideouts here. We have new addition A.J. Brown. Coming with not that much ownership, only 12% ownership. If you look at Devonta Smith, though, similar projection in terms of points divided by salary to A.J. Brown, but coming basically a third of the ownership. So I think Devonta Smith is a really interesting stacking partner with Jalen Hurts. And if you do that, that's a really good way to differentiate yourself off of an otherwise really popular Jalen Hurts. So I like A.J. Brown. I like Devonta Smith. This ownership has me leaning Smith between the two. Like I mentioned with Jared Goff, I think that the Detroit pass catchers are in a really tough spot here. If you're going to pick one, I would go with Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I think I'm pretty comfortable passing on everyone here. Now, the tight ends here I think are really, really interesting. Philly is a lot more susceptible in the linebacker position and safety position compared to corners and their defensive line. So I do think that this matchup bodes well for the tight ends comparison to the Lions wide receivers. So if you're going to play one of these wideouts, I think that one of these pass catchers, I think that Hawkinson would be my choice from the Lions. Goddard, I think, is another guy you could stack Jalen Hurts with. He is coming with a little bit of ownership. So I think that Goddard and A.J. Brown will be the more popular stacks with Jalen Hurts. So again, I think that's another reason to be looking at Devonta Smith, who between Smith and A.J. Brown, obviously Smith has the more rapport because he played with Jalen Hurts the last season. So yeah, I think that's we covered pretty much everything there. I do like the tight ends in this spot. Devonta Smith, if you're looking for a low-owned Hurts correlation, and then Miles Sanders, huge leverage off of Jalen Hurts, and I do think that DeAndre Swift is interesting too. So let's move on. We have the Saints at the Falcons. Saints are 5.5-point favorites, and this game has a 43-point total. Not interested in either quarterback here, so let's just move on. I have Alvin Kamara up here at the top, 7,600. I think he's a decent play. I do think there's other guys around him that are in better spots and maybe have a better role. I'm not quite sure how much Kamara is going to be involved in the pass game with Jameis Winston, and they significantly upgraded their wide receiver, all three wide receiver spots from last year's wide receiver core. They got, Chris Olave is a first rounder. They got Jarvis Landry in free agency, and then Michael Thomas, of course, is coming back. So a lot of targets to go around to those guys. I'm not sure how much is going to be left over for Kamara. Not to mention, Jameis Winston, not much of a check down thrower, or at least historically hasn't been in his career. So not crazy interested in Cordero Patterson. I'm not sure how this backfield is going to shake out, to be honest. And I don't have a whole lot of faith in this Atlanta offense as a whole. So, and when it comes to the wideouts here, no one really that I'm liking a whole lot. Like I mentioned with New Orleans, it's crowded here, so I just don't know who's gonna be the alpha here. Is it Michael Thomas? Is it Jarvis? Is it new rookie Chris Olave? Thomas is also dealing with a little bit of a nagging injury, so that's something to keep an eye on. Really not interested in any of the Atlanta guys. That's a pretty easy pass for me. If you're gonna go with an Atlanta guy, I think you go Kyle Pitts. Decently priced, and I think you're just betting on talent there to win out. So if you're set on playing a Atlanta player, I think you go Pitts. Other than that, I think that they're all comfortable fades. Let's move on here. We have the Browns at the Panthers. This game's a pick'em, meaning no spread. They have these two teams even, and then it's a 42-point team total. Neither quarterback interests me. Let's move on. We got McCaffrey here. McCaffrey might be the best player on the slate. He also might be the highest owned player on the slate. So, bit of a conundrum here. I really like McCaffrey. I think this is just too cheap, 8,500. He should be closer to 9,500, to be honest with you. He should be priced above everyone else, and he's actually the third most expensive running back behind Taylor and Henry. So, I really like McCaffrey here. Like I said, he's going to be one of the most owned players on the slate. I think he's a lock in cash. In tournaments, you can get different, I think. But even in tournaments, I don't think I mind eating this chalk. So I think McCaffrey's a really, really strong play. I'm comfortable fading Chubb and Hunt. I think 6,500 for Chubb, who just gets almost zero work in the pass game, is just too expensive. I'm more than comfortable passing on the Browns running game here. Let's go DJ Moore. I think is probably the only other guy in this game that I'm really interested in. However, I would not play DJ Moore and McCaffrey in the same lineup together, and that's because Panthers only have a 21-point team total. If you play both of those guys together, it's hard for me to see them both hitting a ceiling. I think they tend to negatively correlate because where McCaffrey does a lot of his damage is in the passing game. So if he's doing a lot of damage in the passing game, maybe that takes away from Moore, and vice versa. If Moore is doing a lot in the passing game, it takes away from McCaffrey. That's why I wouldn't play them together. However, individually, I do think that they're both good plays. McCaffrey, I think, might be in a tier of his own. DJ Moore is a very solid play, though. Tight ends, no one really jumping off the page here. Maybe you could talk me into Njoku, who just signed the big contract this offseason, projecting decently well. Minimal ownership. I think the big question mark here is quarterback play. Is Jacoby Brissett going to be able to get the ball to these guys? And are they even going to try to run or try to pass the ball? Or are they just going to go super run heavy? So I think there's concerns here with the Browns offense. Let's move on to Chiefs and Cardinals. Now, these are the late games. This is where it starts to get really interesting. There's 2 games here, Chiefs and Cardinals and Raiders. Raiders versus Chargers with totals over 52 points. And then a couple other interesting potential game stack games with slightly lower totals, Packers at Vikings and Giants at Titans. So if you go in with a Chiefs Cardinals stack or a Raiders Chargers stack, and you get off to a bad start in those early games, maybe consider pivoting off some of those higher owned players in the higher total games off to some Packers or Vikings or Giants or Titans. So opportunity for some late swap here, but let's jump into this game. Chiefs are 6.5 point favorites, and this game has a 54 total, highest total on the slate. This game's on everyone's radars, very understandably. I think both quarterbacks are in play. I slightly prefer Mahomes here, and that's just because Kyler's, pass catching, the pass catchers for the Cardinals are kind of in shambles a little bit. We have DeAndre Hopkins, who is out for the first 6 games. And then we have Rondale Moore, who was just ruled out a little bit ago. And then Zach Ertz is questionable. These are, potentially 3 of their top pass catchers that are out for this game. So I think Kyler can still get there. However, I think that if you want to stack him with Marquise Brown's going to be 17% owned. He's going to be very, very highly owned. So I just think that every single Kyler lineup is going to stack Marquise Brown, and I don't see who else you go to. Maybe AJ Green. I just don't have any faith in AJ Green. So I think for that reason, I'm really preferring Patrick Mahomes. There's just so many more guys that you can pair with. You got Juju Smith-Schuster, who's also projecting for high ownership. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Sky Moore, Mecole Hardman. Now, I think in this first game, I would stray away from Sky Moore. It looks like, at least for now, Juju, MVS, and Hardman are the 3 main guys. So I'd stick with them for now. I think that MVS and Hardman, the deep routes, their ability to get open on deep routes is going to fit really, really well with Mahomes. Now, Hardman's been there for a long time, and it hasn't really panned out. So I think my preference between the two would be Marquez Valdes-Scantling, especially with that big contract he signed this offseason. However, obviously, I think that the 2 best guys to choose from here are Travis Kelce and Juju. Of course, they're coming with the most ownership, so it's like if you want to play the guys that you feel really good about, that's going to come with some ownership. But yeah, I think if you're going to go outside of those 2 guys, I think that Marquez Valdes-Scantling is very interesting. And I also think that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is in play too. So if you want to get off the beaten path a little bit, either one of these hyphenated last name guys, I think for the Chiefs will work. Let's go to, I didn't cover my favorite play on the Cardinals, which is James Conner. James Conner coming in sub 10% owned, with a really solid projection here, 16.6%. It's possible that with all of these pass catchers being out for the Cardinals, that Conner is more involved in the pass game than he already was, and he already was pretty involved in the pass game. So I think that Conner might hit a ceiling here, and I really like Conner, especially if this ownership stays in check at 10%. Even if it gets up to 12, 13, 14%, I still like taking shots on him. I like stacking this game, and if James Conner is going to be one of the lower owned pieces on the Cardinals side, give me James Conner, and I'll stack Mahomes with some pass catchers. So I really like this spot altogether for James Conner, and I like the Chiefs to put up some points here. You can see they have a nearly 30-point team total, so I think this is a really solid game to attack. Let's move on to another high total game, Raiders at Chargers. And I'm not sure why. I think probably just due to pricing, but these guys are coming in lower owned despite having only a 2-point deficit compared to the Chiefs Cardinals total. These teams are coming in really low. And let me mention that Chargers are 3.5 point favorites, and this game has a 52-point total. Look at Herbert and Carr both sub 10% owned. Carr is really, really cheap. Provides he's a near zero in the rushing game, so makes sense that he's a little bit cheaper. But I like both of these guys. Herbert has some rushing ability, shown it before, and has a really good chance to hit that 300 point bonus on DraftKings. So I really like both of these guys. And in a high total game like this, I think you can definitely stack it. Let's go to the running backs. I'm very comfortable fading the Raiders running backs, especially Josh Jacobs, who I think his role is going to diminish this year. And they have a bunch of guys. I'm not sure why Kenyon Drake is listed here with the Raiders, but I think Zamir White and I think Brandon Bolden are going to mix in, and Amir Abdullah. So I think that Jacobs is going to see his role diminish. However, Austin Eckler caught my attention at sub 10% ownership. Now, I think this is due to pricing. He's 8,200, but if he's going to be sub 10% owned in a game that has a 52-point total, and I want in. And we just saw the Chargers sign Sony Michel. I think that's proof that they're not very confident in whoever's behind Eckler. So I really like Eckler in this spot, especially if this ownership is going to hold. Now, the wide receivers, I think all of these guys are pretty fairly priced. So I don't really see a huge edge here. I think that Devontae obviously needs to be considered at all times. Mike Williams is a guy I wanted to mention because his price is exactly the same on FanDuel, and where we get rewarded more for touchdowns over on FanDuel, I'd rather play Mike Williams on FanDuel and Keenan Allen on DraftKings, where he has double-digit target upside. Like I said, Devontae always needs to be considered, especially if you're going to play Derek Carr. I really like pairing him with Devontae Adams. 12% ownership. You couldn't get Devontae with less than 20% ownership on most weeks last year. So I really like the spot for Devontae. I think you can consider Hunter Renfrow and Josh Palmer maybe if you want some really cheap Chargers exposure. Darren Waller in a decent spot. I think it's actually kind of a tougher matchup for him. So I'm okay going with the wideouts, one of Renfrow or Devontae Adams over Waller. Gerald Everett's really cheap. 3,800. I expect him to play a lot. Donald Parham is doubtful, so I don't think he'll play. Gerald Everett should be in line for a ton of snaps at 3,800. I think you definitely need to consider him. Let's move on. Packers at Vikings. Packers are 1.5 point favorites, and this game has a 46.5 point total. I think both QBs are fairly priced. I actually think Aaron Rodgers is a bit overpriced here. So neither one really is going to make my player pool, to be honest. I think both running backs here for the Packers are interesting, especially Aaron Jones. Earlier, his ownership was around 10 to 12%. It's already climbing a little bit. He's a really, really good play, especially, Allen Lazard is questionable. And it's looking more and more like he might not play. If that's the case, Aaron Jones is in such a smash spot. He might rack up 7, 8, 9 catches, like an old like Kamara type game with Drew Brees. Like he has that potential. AJ Dillon going to be heavily involved as well. 5,300, not a bad spot for him. But I think between the two, I prefer Jones. We've just seen that upside with him. I really like Jones in this spot. Dalvin Cook, sub 5% ownership. Against the Packers, which is a team that he's historically killed. I don't put a whole lot of weight into previous matchups, but Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, these are guys that the Packers might prioritize stopping over Dalvin Cook. And if that's the case, Dalvin Cook at sub 5% ownership is really, really enticing to me. And I think it's just a pricing thing because we know that Dalvin has the ceiling to break a slate. So I think that Aaron Jones and Dalvin Cook are really interesting. Normally, I wouldn't play opposing running backs together in the same lineup. I think you can do it here just simply because Jones is going to be so heavily involved in the passing game that I don't think that they negatively correlate like two other opposing running backs might. So let's move on. You can see Allen Lazard. This is showing D now. So if Allen Lazard got downgraded to doubtful, then man, Aaron Jones, one of my favorite plays. I'm really hoping his ownership doesn't get steamed, but I think it probably will. Justin Jefferson, only 7,800 on DraftKings. I think he's fairly cheap on FanDuel too. I think I wrote down his FanDuel price is 8,100. Yeah, so maybe even a better play on FanDuel. He is getting some ownership over there, but definitely someone to consider. Adam Thielen, coming with a little bit of ownership. Both these guys not too crazy, kind of in check, 10 to 15% there. Projecting pretty well. I don't mind Thielen. I could take a shot on both of these guys. I'd probably play one or the other, not together. But yeah, I like both of them. Now, this is another reason we need to keep an eye on this Allen Lazard injury, because these guys, Sammy Watkins, Randall Cobb, and Romeo, I haven't heard it said definitively yet. Is it Dubs or Dubs or Daubs? I'm not 100% sure. I like Dubs, so Dubs sounds cool to me. So for this video, we'll call him Dubs. Sammy Watkins, Randall Cobb, and Romeo Dubs are all insanely cheap, especially Cobb and Dubs. So we'll see. Keep an eye on Lazard. But yeah, if he's out, these guys are all going to be in play. And I think I'd lean Watkins, then Dubs, then Cobb. But yeah, we'll be discussing that throughout the week for sure. Irf Smith, one of my favorite tight end plays on the slate. Very, very cheap. Will probably be on the field for close to 100% of snaps. He was dealing with a little bit of an injury, so it's possible, maybe the 100% of snaps was a little bit exaggerated, but I think that he could play 80, 90% plus of snaps, and then later in the season, he'll be playing closer to 100. I think this is a really cheap price for him. I really like taking shots on Irf Smith here. So that'll do it for that game. And then the last game on the slate is the Giants at the Titans. Titans are 5.5-point favorites in a game with a 44-point total. Now, if you're in my Discord, you know that I have a liking for Daniel Jones, and he's $5,000. Like, hear me out. He's kind of interesting this week. I think Tannehill, just with his lack of pass catchers, or lack of my confidence in his pass catchers, I should say, is I'm out on Ryan Tannehill. Daniel Jones, kind of similar. I have zero confidence in his pass catchers. Everyone from Galladay to Tony, but those two guys in particular have had negative reports throughout the offseason. All of the reporting on them has been really, really down. So, and then the other guy is Sterling Shepard, who can't seem to stay healthy and is definitely at the tail end of his career too. And then they have Wendell Robinson, who's a rookie. Honestly, out of those four, I think Robinson might be my choice just because of his age and the fact that we haven't had nearly as many negative reports on him as we have the others. So Daniel Jones is somewhat enticing to me simply because of the price tag and his rushing ability. I probably won't play him, but his pricing did catch my eye. Now, someone I do really like is Saquon Barkley. However, the field really likes him too. You can see 24% owned, but it's because of this pricing, $6,100. This is just simply too cheap for the role that he's going to have, which could be 75, 80% plus of snaps, and then heavily involved in the passing game as well. So I really like Barkley here. Feels like a cash game play and maybe a fade in tournaments at this ownership, but we'll see how ownership shakes out closer to Sunday. Derrick Henry is really interesting because on both sites, he's sandwiched right in between Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey. And because of this, his ownership is going to be lower than both of those guys. I think that Taylor was 15%, McCaffrey around 27%, and you can get Derrick Henry at 10.5%. Now, because Henry's not heavily involved in the pass game, his skill set fits a little bit better over on Fanduel, but I think you can consider him for both sites. It's a little bit tough for me to click his name when McCaffrey's cheaper, but that's exactly how the field is going to feel too. So something to keep in mind that I think Derrick Henry could come in lower owned, and he could provide some leverage just based off the pricing on both sites. The wideouts here, no one really that enticing to me. We did mention Wendell Robinson. He's the stone minimum price at $3,000. I think that he's interesting. I just think that all four of these guys for the Giants are going to rotate. I don't know that one of them can separate. So I think that if I was going to play just based off of pricing, I would probably go Robinson and then maybe Tony. These other guys, Shepard and Galladay, just too expensive for me. So if you want to play Tony or Robinson at $4,100 or Stone Min $3,000, I think that's okay, but not something I'm like going out of my way to do. And then on the Tennessee side, nothing here for me. Robert Woods coming off an ACL tear. He's at the end of his career. Treylon Burks is the first rounder. He got beaten out by Westbrook Akini. So I have zero faith in these guys, and I think Kyle Phillips, who's also a rookie, is going to mix in as well. So no interest in anyone on the Tennessee side outside of maybe Derrick Henry if you want to get a little different. And then no one on for tight end. If you want Daniel Bellinger, if you want to go there, sure. You got the Daniel Jones to Daniel Bellinger, the Daniel connection, as the kids say. So no one here for me really from this game. It's Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and I wouldn't play them together. So awesome. That's going to do it for the week 1 main slate. If you tuned in, I really, really do appreciate it. If you're not in our Discord, I highly recommend you get in there by Sunday. It gets super active on Sunday and for the primetime games. Everyone's in there helping each other out, and we have a really, really knowledgeable community full of people that are, brand new players or very experienced players. So no matter what your experience level is, you'll fit right in. I really, really appreciate you tuning in again. I'll drop that link for the Discord down below in the description. And let's have a great week 1, everyone. Thank you again.